Welcome, everybody, to the Lipsey'S Aim Higher podcast. I am Rob Abruzzino. That is Jason Klossner, and we have a very special guest today. We have several special guests, but only one willing to be on camera. Adam Kraut, the executive director for the Second Amendment Foundation. So, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
How we doing?
I'm great.
How we enjoying Louisiana?
It's hot and humid. For everybody who's not been to Louisiana, probably also not a surprise.
It's also, it's really hot out.
Don't really recommend it in August.
Yeah, we are here in the summer. You know, when we were scheduling this trip, I got a little bit of, man, you picked the hottest month to go down there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, might have.
yeah, for sure. So welcome, though. Yeah. We're really happy. You guys have kind of toured the building today and got the rundown on us. I know we've been working on some things together, but hadn't really been able to connect face to face thus far. So really nice to see you. Lauren Hill's behind me, and we'll get a shot of her here in a minute. Just kidding. She's the senior vice president. So, and Matt Coffey's here as well. So we've kind of got the whole crew. But again, only one brave enough to get on our podcast.
Brave enough or told I have to be on the camera. One of the two.
Right. He said I can ask him anything, but he doesn't have to answer everything. So we'll see where this takes us. But why don't you give us a rundown of the Second Amendment Foundation? Just kind of who you guys are, what you do, and just kind of a global picture for a lot of people who might not know out there.
Sure. Is this one of those I can decline to answer and then we can move on?
Well,
I've got jokes too.
This one you have to answer.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Then we'll go from here.
Yeah. So the Second Amendment Foundation, what is it? Great question. It's a question that I kind of had myself in a little bit, and I guess maybe some backdrop on that personal experience, and then we can talk about the organization. So I was very interested in politics growing up, and I went to college, and my degree was in political science, actually, because I thought politics were cool, and I get to the end, I'm like, well, what am I going to do with a poli-sci degree? But around that same time, the importance of the Second Amendment at a personal level was becoming more prevalent, and what can I do to preserve that? So at the time, I really had only heard of two groups, one of which we're just not going to talk about, but they were known as the guys, at least in my mind, that were up on Capitol Hill doing all the lobbying, and the other was the Second Amendment Foundation. And I always just had this perception that they were the legal eagles doing stuff in the courtroom, and that's kind of all I knew about them at the time. And as I got further involved in the industry through, being a lawyer and practicing and doing some stuff on YouTube and getting dragged into writing articles about guns and other things, and then my knowledge set of the organization became a little more firm, and actually really learned a lot when I started working for the organization back in 2022. And what I came to learn, which wasn't necessarily a surprise, but the depth of the history of the organization, of how much it had been influential in really building a lot of what we see today, at least as far as the legal side of things, that was kind of unknown to me in a large way. I knew they had won major court cases and did a lot of things that ultimately really affected the right, but the leading up to that. So I guess that's a good place to start then. So we'll go back. We'll turn our clocks back, or the years back to 1974, when the organization was founded by Alan Gottlieb.
Bellevue, Washington. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, see?
Bellevue, Washington.
Did a little research.
Yeah. Yeah, so weird place, right? Everybody goes, well, why are you guys based in Washington? Well, one, we don't do lobbying, so being in D.C. doesn't really help us. And two, Alan was actually brought out there, and he used to work for Young Americans for Freedom, which was a conservative-based youth organization, and he actually had an interest in the right to keep and bear arms, and out of all their youth chapters, there was one in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. So he came out there to run that, and that ultimately became the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, which is the C4, and it predates SAF by 3 years. That was founded in 1971. So 74 rolls around, SAF's founded. Well, what's the purpose of SAF? At the time, it was, how do we get a case to the United States Supreme Court that deals with the right to keep and bear arms? At the time, you don't really have any decisions from federal courts that deal with it. You have Miller that came out of the Supreme Court in the 30s. Everybody likes to talk about it, but the reality is Miller didn't even have counsel, and he was nowhere to be found, so that one just went in favor of the government, and the dealt with short barrel shotgun. So there was no case anywhere really that said anything about, is this an individual right or is it a collective right? And of course that was the argument for any number of years between the two sides. Well, it's an individual right. No, it's a collective right. 1974 also marks the first time that there's a law review article that's published that talks about The Second Amendment being an individual right untethered to malicious service, that you as an individual have a right to keep and bear arms. So in trying to figure out how do we elevate a case, one of the things that SAF did was got together a bunch of very smart people, lawyers and scholars, and said, well, what do we need in order to build this foundation? And I like to use the word foundation because it's in our name too, and I think it kind of plays off it. So what they did was they did a lot of discussion of what do we need, and that ended up being law review articles, over time, of course, original research as to, well, at the time of the founding, what did this world look like and what was the understanding of it. And that culminated in the early years in a lot of publications and events. So you had the Legal Scholars Conference in the 70s where it was, again, grabbing scholars and lawyers together to peer review things and come up with, okay, well, what's the next thing we need to put out there into the public world? And this is really prior to lawsuits being filed. But, again, the information we're going to need to cite in court to kind of prove what our point is here. So that's kind of the 70s, and, there's newsletters and other things like that. You get to the 80s, you get our first case. Challenge to then Mayor Dianne Feinstein's total handgun ban in San Francisco.
Yeah.
We win. There was also a small town up in Connecticut that I never remember the name of, but I like to tell the story anyway because it had the same thing. Total handgun ban, we sue them, we also win there. The 80s also give you the Gun Rights Policy Conference, which was probably the next big event. And this is, I believe, our 39th annual one coming up this year, which will be in San Diego at the end of September. I'll just plug it now because I'll forget later. It's free to attend. It's a gathering of lawyers, scholars, activists, people who are involved in state groups, and just generally the citizen who wants to be better informed on the gun rights issue. We have speakers all day, talking about different things, whether it's legal, whether it's legislative, things like that, and that's put on with the sister C4 I was talking about earlier, and it's free to attend. That's at the end of September, and we do live stream it, and it's available on YouTube after the fact, so if you can't make it. But it's a great way to meet some of those people who are the quote-unquote movers and shakers, and God, I hate that term, so please forgive me for using it.
It's all good.
But the people at the forefront of, gun rights stuff and trying to advance the right.
Yeah.
So you get that in the 80s as well with those couple of lawsuits.
So again, these real quick, these cases, these are very specific, protecting the right to bear arms. You don't really deviate from that path at all, which is the core of the Second Amendment, of course.
Right. So our mission, as it's laid out, is through legal action and education to better inform the public on Second Amendment.
Right.
And it is the Second Amendment. There are some ancillary First Amendment issues that impact it that we do as well, but those are kind of few and far between. It's mainly just, is there a ban? Okay. Well, guess what?
Right.
We're suing you.
Right.
Adam, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered is, when these plaintiffs, how do you find them? Do they find you? Do you find them?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So let me answer that now, and then we'll go back to the organization for a moment. So we have what I kind of describe as three different buckets as far as litigation. We have our strategic litigation, where we're looking at how the case law of the world looks today and what we want it to look like tomorrow. And okay, well, what do we need to go from A to B? So how we were doing that in the 70s as far as the foundation to get a case to the Supreme Court, it's now, okay, we know that the law says this, but we believe these types of restrictions are unconstitutional. So what are the specific kind of facts and then the people we need in order to bring a lawsuit challenging these restrictions in order to hopefully move the needle further in the right of the restoration of the right to keep and bear arms, or in that wet direction. So then we look for people like that, and we'll either, because through connections of just knowing people, or we'll just put out to the general public, hey, we're looking for you. Do you meet this criteria? So I'll use 18 to 20 as an example here. Are you an 18 to 20-year-old that lives in this state? Do you have a clean record? Is your social media clean? And do you want to purchase these types of firearms, or do you want to carry a firearm in public, or apply for a carry permit, but you can't? And then those people come to us. There's also what I like to call opportunistic litigation, where somebody contacts us and says, hey, I have a particular problem. And they tell us what their issue is. And we look at it and say, all right, not only can we help you, but there's a public benefit to helping you. It goes beyond just your specific instance. There's a number of people affected by this particular thing. And so those are people that just, show up in our inbox. They call us, and we're able to look at that and say, okay, yes, we can do something for you because there's a broader public benefit, and it's not just we're representing one person and it only affects them. Unfortunately, we can't do that for everybody, and believe me, there's plenty of people who ask us for it. And then there's what I kind of term as reactive litigation, and that would be the best example I can give you of this more recently anyway is post-Bruin. So you get Bruin in 2022, and you have New York. Okay, we have to give people carry permits now? That's fine. We'll do that, but we're going to make everywhere a so-called sensitive place so they can't actually carry there. So, of course, a state passes a law, and we go, all right, well, we're going to sue them. It's not strategic because we weren't planning for it. It's not somebody knocking on our door. It's a legislature doing something stupid and unconstitutional, and we're going to sue them for it. So that's kind of the way they come to us is either they knock on our door or we're putting it out there very publicly that, hey, and then sometimes there's some other nuanced issues where we want to be a little more quiet about it. And through back channels, we, ask local groups. We have great relations with a number of state organizations. So we're like, hey, do you know anybody that meets this criteria? And they may float it out to their members kind of quietly, and people come in the door that way as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably more of your high profile cases when you get involved with, state governments and, things like that. I was also reading, even here in New Orleans after Katrina, the fight with the mayor at the time, about
the confiscations.
Yeah, the confiscation.
We sued over that, and we
and
won that too.
Yeah. That was Ray Nagin at the time. So, anyways, he was a great mayor. No, he wasn't. Anyways,
there was for those of you that couldn't see, there was an eye roll.
Yeah. let's not name names, even though I just did. All right. Anyways, back to the organization.
Yeah. Sorry. So no, it's fine. So in the 80s, again, it's more public education that's going on. There's some litigation. The 90s, there's a couple of cases that are brought, but really, kind of where I tell everybody the world begins with is Heller. Because that's the first time you get a Supreme Court case in recent memory anyway that talks about the Second Amendment, and in a very material fashion where the Supreme Court says, okay, yes, it's an individual right. Yes, it's untethered to malicious service. Handguns are, in fact, protected arms. And the very interesting thing about that is at the time, the anti-gun crowd was very much, long guns are fine. It's handguns that we need to ban. And you look, and handguns still to this day in crime are the most used firearm. There's no question about it. But the Supreme Court said it is the choice of the people for self-defense, and we can't second-guess that. So we get handguns are protected arms, via Heller. The day Heller was decided, we file the lawsuit that's known as McDonald versus City of Chicago. So another step back for a moment. When we're talking about Heller, it was against the District of Columbia. The District of Columbia is not a state. It's a district, and Congress and the federal government control that. So that decision only applied as to the federal government. McDonald was a challenge to city ordinance in Chicago. And what that case ultimately led to was the incorporation of the Second Amendment against the state. So as we have it with the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, that these constitutional amendments in the Bill of Rights are now applicable to the states. So McDonald is the reason that we're able to sue all the various states and local municipalities or city governments for violations of the Second Amendment, which is really where the floodgates then, if they opened with Heller, it just game on.
Yeah.
So we won, obviously, in McDonald, and that was the SAF case. So that was our first Supreme Court case, and a victory, which was great. And from that time, we've sued a lot of people. I guess just going through the major cases, not ours, but you get Catano, which came out of Massachusetts. It says stun guns, they're protected under the Second Amendment, even though they didn't exist at the time of the founding. And then, we get Bruin in 2022. We're going back to the Supreme Court this year. We have a case that will be heard in October that deals with ATF's frame or receiver rule. And I guess I'd be remiss if I just didn't mention the other two that were recently decided. You get Cargill, which was not a Second Amendment case, but it does deal with ATF and administrative agencies overreach. So that was decided on the Administrative Procedures Act. And I think there was a lot of misconception generally speaking through the public and also politicians that, this is gun rights. Well, no, this is actually just the administrative state going beyond. And I guess when you were asking earlier, the other types of cases we get involved in, that would be another example of something that's not straight Second Amendment, but certainly impacts Second Amendment related issues. And then, of course, this term also Rahimi was decided, and Rahimi was a case that dealt with somebody who was under a domestic violence restraining order and whether or not that restriction was constitutional or not. Rahimi is kind of in a broader sense, when we talk about prohibited persons, one of the things when I went to visit FBI's Nix Center a number of years ago, back when I was in private practice, they asked a question to the audience in the room, and there were lawyers and I think just licensees that were there for learning stuff. What do you think is the biggest prohibitor? And when we're talking about prohibitions, we're looking at, the USC 922, all the stuff you fill out on the 473 where you check no, and then you get to leave with the gun. And the biggest prohibitor is under 922G1, which says, have you been convicted of a crime that's punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding 1 year? And that's a question a lot of people get wrong. And here's where most people don't know. If you look at the definition of crime punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding 1 year in the federal law, what it actually means is also a state law misdemeanor that's punishable by more than 2 years imprisonment. And this is where everybody gets hung up. So if you get convicted of a nonviolent misdemeanor in your state, and you could have been punished to a prison term or jail for more than 2 years, doesn't matter whether you served a day or not, you're federally prohibited from possessing firearms and ammunition. So prohibited persons cases are another thing where SAF was a leader in kind of bringing them. There was a case that came out of the Third Circuit back in 2016. It's called Binderup versus Attorney General. It involved two individuals. Mr. Binderup was convicted of a crime in Pennsylvania for corruption of a minor, which was punishable by up to 5 years. And there was another individual that on appeal came out of Maryland, and he had been convicted for carrying a firearm without a permit. The Third Circuit heard that case and ultimately found that prohibition as applied to them was unconstitutional, which opened the door for as applied challenges for individuals that were convicted of any kind of misdemeanor that was nonviolent. I litigated a couple of those myself in private practice that we did win. There were some that we won originally that went up on appeal and ultimately lost. Cert was denied, which was kind of disappointing. There's still one of those challenges going on today in the Third Circuit for an individual who was convicted of DUI at the highest rate. So it's fascinating to kind of see that body of work, how things that happened prior to my time here, I was able to use in my practice, and now now that I'm here at the organization, that we're still doing today. And I think that's really cool to be able to be a part of that, both, having done it privately and now back at the organizational level, trying to keep that going for the restoration of rights of people, because their options are extremely limited. It's either you get a pardon, which, is discretionary and unlikely, or you get some kind of relief from the court, which sometimes, just doesn't happen either. Anyway, so all that to say, since our inception, SAF has been involved in over 260 lawsuits. That's whether we've filed them as a organization, we've funded them where we weren't a party to the lawsuit itself, or filing amicus briefs in other people's cases. And that's something that, people kind of sometimes are like, okay, well, what's an amicus brief? And I think that's a good thing to answer. What is an amicus brief? Those are what are known as friend of the court briefs, where you as a group, or even sometimes individuals that are not a party to the lawsuit, file a brief supporting one of the party's positions. And really the point is to add information to the conversation that the party themselves can't, based on briefing limits, or they want to go more in depth into it and just don't have the room. So they're like, hey, can you do this? We do those because at the end of the day, while I want to see a SAF case win, the bigger thing I want to see is us win. And if I can do that through helping someone else's case that might be further along or in a better position, great. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here to accomplish. And that's the restoration of the right, securing the right, and hopefully expanding the right.
So you can channel your time and or resources to help people without being actively involved in a case.
Yeah. Or, another organization brings a case that, they got a great judge, or they have the right plaintiffs in the right venue. And it's like, okay, well, that could be a winner, and we want to see them succeed. So of course we're going to help, because we're all in this together at the end of the day.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Adam knows a lot about the law.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the downsides of being a
Hi,
lawyer.
Lori.
Huh?
Oh, Lori's here. The boss is here. Come on over. No, I'm kidding. We're in deep right now, actually. But that's fantastic. What are some commonalities that you hear? That people that seek you, or are there any common threads that people seek you out for? Common lawsuits, anything like that, or is it just kind of all over the board?
It's kind of all over the board. So people seek us out for everything because they all have their, an issue that's obviously very important to them because it touches them directly. They're not always the ones that we can do. But right now, I would say if we were looking at our portfolio of litigation, the common things you would see would be types of arms that are protected. So we have, yesterday on a podcast, I said 8. It's 6 challenges to assault weapons bans. We have 8 challenges to magazine capacity restrictions. We have any number of lawsuits. I want to say it's between 4 to 7 that deal with 18 to 20-year-old issues. That includes purchase of handguns from FFLs, which is illegal at the federal level. Actually, when I left my former employer and before I started at SAF in that small interim period of time, Alan asked me to litigate a challenge on behalf of SAF for that. So I started in private practice doing that, and then as the executive director, where we won in the Western the one of the districts of I think it was the Northern District of West Virginia. That's currently on appeal at the Fourth Circuit, and it stayed pending the disposition of another case, but we did win that. The judge found that to be unconstitutional. We have a sister challenge to that that's in the Fifth Circuit right now that came out of actually the Western District of Louisiana. Carry issues that deal with 18 to 20-year-olds. So there was a case out of the Eighth Circuit that we won recently that the way Minnesota's law works is that you need a carry permit to be able to carry, and those between 18 and 20 could not apply for one based on their age. So we won that. They just asked for rehearing en banc. So another term to define real quick. When you're up on appeal at the federal courts, at the circuit court, usually the case is first heard by a 3-judge panel. You can ask for en banc rehearing, which means that the court as a whole, typically it's about 12 judges, varies a little bit from circuit to circuit. An en banc court can overrule a panel decision. Sometimes the courts will, on their own, just either say we're going to rehear it en banc, or in a rare instance like we just had in the Fourth Circuit, where an opinion came out yesterday in our Maryland assault weapons ban challenge, the Fourth Circuit said we're just going to hear it en banc to start. There was a little bit of an issue with that one because that case was filed prior to Bruin. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, was held while they were deciding Bruin. Bruin gets decided. They granted our petition in that case along with 3 other cases that were up there. They vacated the circuit court's decision. They remanded it back to the circuit court. We went through all the briefing and oral argument in front of the panel. It sat for 13 months, and then the Fourth Circuit said, actually, we're going to do this en banc, so we want more briefing and oral argument again. And that opinion actually just came out yesterday, where unfortunately and kind of unsurprisingly, they said that, nope, that restriction is constitutional, so we will be filing a cert petition with the Supreme Court on that. And given they granted cert once, hopefully they'll do it again, but there are other challenges, percolating on that exact issue as well. So 18 to 20 assault weapons bans, magazine
so you're
capacity,
busy.
carry.
I'm just summarizing here. You guys are quite busy.
Yeah, we are busy. Carry's another very big one, post Bruin,
Right.
all the sensitive places. I think we have 5 challenges to sensitive places issues, and then, of course, the permitting stuff that now stems from that as well.
So it sounds like a majority of your cases are on the state level. Then.
Well, so they're challenging state laws. They're the only federal stuff that we're dealing with at this point are the ATF rules, because Congress can't agree what color the sky is, let alone pass a law. So we're not really dealing with federal. I take that back. That 18 to 20 handgun purchase was a federal one as well. But so most of our work is in federal court, though, and because we're levying Second Amendment challenges, federal court's where we're going to be for that. There's a couple of cases, just a small handful, that are in state courts for any number of reasons, including perhaps it's more dealing with privacy. So an example of that in California, and California is a state that I think everybody likes to go, just move, right? Like, who cares about California? I think we have 17 active lawsuits in California, but this one in particular, they have any number of different ways of collecting information from purchasers. And one of the things that their legislature did was pass a law that says, okay, well, we're going to share certain data with researchers when it's requested. and that, there's a privacy implication in that, right? And that was a state constitutional issue that was being fought. So it wasn't a Second Amendment issue, but it touches gun owners and gun ownership. And one of the other things about that was when they were, saying we're collecting all this information, they said originally it was just it'll only be shared with law enforcement. So all these people who have been providing information for years and years and years had only assumed that it may be shared with law enforcement, not researchers.
Right.
And where does that information go? How's it protected and things like that?
How many attorneys do you have? Are they on the, I guess on the payroll, so to speak, on the roster,
Sure.
or kind of freelance? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, so our model has been that we work with outside counsel for pretty much everything. As far as attorneys that are employed by the organization, I'm one of them. The other one is our director of legal operations, Bill Sack. We're, as far as litigating cases in-house, I'm attorney of record for a couple of them. Fortunately for my time anyway, I'm only really actively working on 2 or 3 of them.
Right. So you guys are wearing a couple hats. So
I'm the executive director. I'm wearing many hats.
Right. So the 2 actual in-house attorneys you have are both fulfilling other roles, obviously.
Yeah. So Bill's role is to really manage our litigation portfolio, work with the attorneys to make sure the arguments we want are being made, reviewing briefs, providing edits, making sure everything's coordinated and that stuff's getting done. But the bulk of the actual work is done by outside counsel.
Okay. Interesting.
Which, of course, there's questions as to, efficiency as far as dollars and things like that. And I think that's a really good time to actually kind of, segue into this part. So when we're talking about this, one of the things that we do pride ourselves on is we don't pay rack rates with lawyers. We always, with maybe one exception, negotiate reduced rates. And the deal is you get to work with us, and some lawyers really want to do that. And also hey, we're a nonprofit, right? We're trying to be very responsible stewards of our donors' money. If I'm paying you $1,000 an hour, which I'm not, that gets expensive real quick, very expensive. And when you have 55 plus active lawsuits, you can imagine the bills that would be coming in if that were the case. So we do negotiate reduced rates with our counsel. A lot of our counsel have been working with the foundation prior to me even being here, and they're some of the best lawyers in the country on this issue. We really do look to work with those who are familiar with the issue, know what they're doing, and are going to make all the right arguments and strategic decisions throughout the litigation process to ensure the best kind of result. Of course, at the end of the day, you're stuck with the judge you're stuck with.
Sure.
So there's only so much you can kind of do for that. But so it's mostly outside counsel. 99% of it is outside counsel. And I was looking at our audit for this past year, and one of the things that I think is also important to point out is that 80 cents of every dollar that comes into the Second Amendment Foundation is spent on the mission.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah, so we do make sure that it does go to either the legal portfolio or the public education side of things, and that's one of the other parts of the organization's mission. It goes back to the Gun Rights Policy Conference, the Legal Scholars Conference, and just informing the public. So we're working this year as we continue to build out things to really kind of one of my goals anyway is to bolster the public education side of things. So we got some neat ideas for that I'm building the framework out on now. We're getting some proofs of concept. We're trying to figure out the best way to build upon that and kind of build a stock before we release it. But I'm hoping in late 2024, early 2025, we'll be able to roll that out to the public to better inform them about the Second Amendment, and that way they can contribute to the conversation in a meaningful way and help inform others as to why they should care. You guys as a distributor know that dealers are ordering guns, and I remember I don't think I was still working at a gun store. So I managed a gun store too. I think throw that out there, right? I worked in a gun store for a couple of years behind the counter, and I saw the person coming in to buy their gun. And one of the things I noticed was that most of them, they got their gun and that was it. There's no investment. I got mine, so what do I care? But I think more people are starting to become interested in wanting to be involved in some form or fashion of preserving the ability of either themselves in the future or their children to be able to do that. And I think, particularly during COVID, you had a lot of people go, oh, I'm responsible for me. And
yeah, for sure.
How can I? Well, armed self-defense is certainly one way to be responsible for yourself. So I think that kind of information being able to be distributed to those types of people will help inform them as to why they should care and why they should think about whether whether it's voting or just even the conversations they're having with people as to, okay, the importance of it, and not just simply, well, the Constitution says, and slam their fist on the table and walk away, because that doesn't convince anybody. And it's no different than the other side trying to convince any of us by slamming their fist on the table and, whatever the point they want to make is. Like, does nothing.
I want to talk about this project that we're doing together, but one last thing, and Jason brought this up earlier when we were talking, and we have the election looming, of course. So what does this mean for you? What does the outcome mean for SAF, and maybe, kind of the big picture there? What are your thoughts either way, how this thing plays out for you guys?
So we're a little bit different. You look at other organizations that are within the space, they're all C4s. We're C3. So it's a little backwards. One thing we can't do as a C3, generally speaking, is lobbying of any kind, let alone, so all the grassroots lobbying you see other groups do, and the actual lobbying we just can't touch. Our work is relegated to public education and, the litigation that we do.
So you're just a spectator, really, like the rest of us.
Not quite.
As far as the election's concerned.
Well, as far as the election, we can talk about policy and why, certain policies would obviously be bad for the American people. But the bigger implication for this is the judicial nominations. Right now, last I looked anyway, I believe this current administration has appointed more judges than the Trump administration did. Now, Trump gave us 3 Supreme Court justices. Great. Helps at the top. Gave us a lot of
for now until we have 32 justices.
Yes,
soon.
Yeah. So there's a couple points here, but he nominated the trial court judges and circuit court judges. But right now, this administration has nominated more judges. You get another 4 years of that, even if the Supreme Court remains unchanged. And the Supreme Court doesn't grant cert in any Second Amendment case. And as we saw post-Heller, post-McDonald, really, if you ignore Catano, it took them 12 years to, decide another Second Amendment case. Right. That's potentially a very long time of bad decisions where a district court, trial court, gives a ruling. Okay, it's not binding on anybody except those particular litigants, but it goes up to the circuit court. Well, now it's the law of the circuit, and some circuits are very big. The Ninth Circuit has a lot of states in it. Right. So those decisions could perhaps, particularly the judicial nominations, if you get a lot of judges that are not going to rule in favor of the Constitution, it's going to mean that there's going to be a lot of gun laws and restrictions that'll be upheld. And if the Supreme Courts don't grant cert, which is discretionary, you could have a very, very quickly become back into a factioned area. So in that regard, the election...
It's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a big deal.
And then, of course, the Supreme Court, everybody loves to talk about it, and I think it's absolutely important, but I think a lot of people skip over the part of the lower courts and how impactful that could actually be.
It's got to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and, one of the things that we were talking about here is that the recent ruling on the Chevron deal seemed to be hopeful that might handcuff, no pun intended, the ATF a little bit from just being able to make arbitrary rules that Congress obviously has punted to them and let them just deal with. Is there any comments on that? Or
yeah, I think
we could go on with this for
Well, this one's I think really,
just
honestly, is probably one of the more important ones that we've seen in the last because the arbitrary rulings we saw with the arm brace, with all these different things that never went through Congress, but yet were basically decreed law. Those are the things that seems to have jammed up people and dealers and consumers more than anything.
Yeah, so that decision was an important decision in reining in the administrative state, and we're here as Second Amendment people, so obviously ATF is the answer. But you look at any other administrative agency, and that's going to hamstring them as well. The one thing we did see when we look at the bump stocks in particular, and again not a Second Amendment case, but an administrative agency case under the APA. So the first bump stock case in the country I actually filed on behalf of my former employer and a couple other clients when I was working as outside counsel prior to actually working at the other organization.
I was going to ask you about that a minute ago if you were involved, not you, but if the organization was, but you were personally.
Yeah, so I filed then acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, if I remember his name correctly, when he signed that final rule, we filed that lawsuit, I think, 4 hours after it was actually signed.
Wow.
So before it was even published in the Federal Register. So that case, you get a few of them ultimately filed. None of them claimed the Second Amendment. You know, they were all APA related cases. But in that, as those cases progressed, the government didn't argue Chevron deference. In fact, they specifically disclaimed Chevron deference and said, no, we're not claiming that you should defer to us based on Chevron, which was kind of interesting. So Chevron certainly plays a part. How impactful it will be in the long term remains to be seen. Certainly now it's just going straight back to the statutory text of, okay, well, what does the statute say, and is this within the realm of that? And, ambiguities don't get resolved in favor of, the administrative agency's interpretation of it anymore, but they get to come make their argument, and that doesn't mean judges won't agree with them anyway.
Wow.
Interesting.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
We could I just want to throw scenarios and questions, but we got to move on a little bit here.
I was gonna say we could get you a lot smarter lawyers to do that too.
No, it's all good, man. Let's jump into the project. So we've got this new venture, pretty new, I'd say. Last about a month.
Yeah,
maybe a month in.
Yeah, about a month.
Yeah. So we launched this, of course, with Jason's help and working behind the scenes as always with you guys. And I'll let Jason kind of jump into the project, but really, really cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've had a great working relationship with SIG. We've done a lot of really cool projects with them, and we've done a lot of good projects that has been able to raise funds for organizations that are out there fighting a good fight. And one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to take our successful lineup of our kind of coyote colored 365 XL and add the 365 macro to the mix and come up with a 2A edition. And this way our goal with SIG was to pick, take 6 months, and so two people a year to take funds from the sale of those guns and donate it to those organizations. And it took us about 5 seconds to determine that the Second Amendment Foundation needed to be our inaugural partner with this.
Right.
So we launched these guns. They've already been really a home run. We've sold a ton of them. They're cool guns. You get an extra magazine. You get a cool coin and everything. We're donating $25 for every one of those guns sold to the Second Amendment Foundation.
80% of that, which will go to fighting the cause.
Exactly. Right. And the good thing about it is the guns are around the same price as a regular 365.
Right.
So you're not only are you getting the donation aspect, you're actually getting a better value because that extra magazine I think is about $50 at retail. Yeah, so it's a great deal. It's a cool gun, but even better, it's going to a great cause.
Yeah.
And the dealer base has really responded well. They're reordering. The consumers are buying them. The guns look really cool, and it's been a great project. And I'm really excited what the future of this is going to be.
If you go to LIPSEY'S.com, you can. We've actually got a banner up, like a main banner on the homepage. You can just click on that. It'll take you to a page with all the specs. It shows you all the 3 guns, all the information, a little background on the project. So. That's really cool. What are your thoughts on this, Adam? I know you had to be. I know you do several kind of collaborations, I guess, or projects with different entities to raise money.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned before, you guys are a nonprofit. So, when you guys started kicking this around.
Yeah, we operate off the generosity of donors and members. So, no, I mean, we were very honored to be the inaugural pick for that. That certainly means a lot. We also have a great working relationship with SIG. They're one of our, high-level supporters, and as far as helping us with some of the projects I've been tackling, at the organization, they've been instrumental in helping us get some of that stuff done. The guns are super sweet.
Yeah.
The 365s are cool guns, and you can pack a lot of rounds into a very tiny gun.
Oh, yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'd be remiss if I didn't point out was that a lot of us here at the Second Amendment Foundation are shooters as well. We're not just people who are like, okay, yeah, it's a job, and we care about the right, but I'm very invested in gun culture, in being a part of it, training, carrying guns. So is Bill, our director of legal operations. We get out there and we shoot stuff. So we know that SIG's guns, particularly those 365s, I know they're popular. I remember when they were released. I still have a great relationship with the shop I used to work at. So every time I stop in there, I see stuff on their shelves. When I worked there, we carried Lipsey's exclusives. I haven't been in there recently, but I would venture a guess that these are probably in that store as well. And if not, I'll certainly make sure to change that because they are cool guns and they will sell.
Yeah. Well, I knew Adam was a good dude because one of the first things he told us earlier was, yeah, man, I've got a couple of your old exclusive guns personally.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, he's a gun guy. He's cool. He can come.
Well,
he can come talk.
Yeah, you mentioned working the counter, and he's got if you can't see, he's got a cool, not a COOL, KUHL shirt on. So he's the real deal. He's not. He's he may be an attorney, but he's not wearing like a suit and tie right now or anything like that.
Actually, you got to pay extra for that.
Yeah. So. That's fantastic. Well, I know we're really fired up about this, and it sounds like we're off to a great start. I haven't seen the numbers, but Jason tells me they're fantastic. So we did a really cool video as well. You can find on YouTube, and your page. When people want to get involved with SAF, what's the best, easiest way? Through your website, I assume?
Yeah, so the website certainly is the easiest way. So saf.org, you can join as a member. Up at the top in the right-hand corner, you can either join, donate, do both if you want.
Right.
Sign up for our newsletter further down on the homepage. That's also another great way to stay informed. If today, for whatever reason, financially you can't do it, one of the other ways you can help is certainly just by being engaged. See what we do. Tell your friends. Interact with us on social media. All that stuff helps. And ultimately drives the awareness that we're looking for, both from a brand and an organization, but also really for at the end of the day, the right, because that's what we're here to do.
Right.
So those are all great ways. Finding us on social media, again, is another one. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn.
What's your social media if you want to shout it out to everybody?
So
is it the same across?
Except for Twitter. So for everything else, it's Second Amendment Foundation. Right. Twitter, just because of character length, it's 2AFDN, so Frank Delta.
But searchable.
I don't know. Yeah, you can find it.
Yeah, we'll find it there.
And there's, I mean, a lot of your members got the benefit of being in that injunction with the arm brace deal.
Yeah.
Which is, so it's not just you get a sticker type of thing. You actually get a real benefit from being associated with these guys.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, going back to court cases real quick, national injunctions are the Supreme Court does not favor those. And I know it was a kind of a running joke during the Trump administration for any number of other issues, but we'll just find a judge in Hawaii in the Ninth Circuit that will grant a nationwide injunction against what the administration is doing.
Right.
But a lot of these injunctions that have been coming out recently from, judges have been limited to the named plaintiffs and the organizations. And one of the benefits of being a member of the organization is that as a member of the organization, it also applies to the membership itself. So that's another way that you get some additional protections there.
Fantastic. Gosh, anything else you want to add? Anything you want to close with? You got a strong close? Your closing argument?
Usually you stand in front of a mirror and prepare those, I think. Unfortunately, I haven't had to do many of those. But
do you do that? Is that a thing? I would imagine so.
Yeah, oral argument's a very interesting thing. I've done a couple of them in my day. Yeah. Fortunately, I was one of those lawyers that did a lot of paperwork and a lot of writing, but not a lot of arguing. And there's definitely a skill to that. There are some very good lawyers that can get up there and just wow you.
It's just like Suits.
Yeah. It's exactly like that. Yeah, just show up one day, you duck into a room, you're like, hey, you're hired. No, I mean, I think what I would tell people is, go check out our website, go see the work that we're doing, look around, and I think what you'll find is that the organization's reputation, it's our 50th anniversary. I'd be remiss if I didn't point that out. We've been around for 50 years. We have a strong reputation. We are responsible with your dollars. We do good work, and we have proven results. And we don't just live on the results of yesteryear. Yeah, I like to point them out because they're victories, but as I said, we have more than 55 active lawsuits today. So we are doing things currently, and we're constantly looking for new ways where new cases to bring, not new ways, but new avenues to effectuate the right across the country. And that's what we do. We're good at it. We're known for it. And we work with some of the best people in the space to be able to put our, win at the end of the day. And that's what we're here to do, is to help restore the right for everybody.
That's fantastic. And I'll tell you, we couldn't be happier to have you here. We're really, really happy about the visit. Love this partnership we have. We're just going to try to sell. If you're looking for a SIG, if you're looking for any kind of concealed carry gun, this is a fine gun, no matter what. we're a little partial to our exclusives, and certainly for a good cause here. So if you're in the market for one, this is the one to get. But thank you so much for coming by, Adam. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for having us.
You're going to be
awesome.
You're going to be at SHOT Show?
Of course.
Okay, cool. Maybe we'll do a little recap or something.
Yeah.
We'll have this. We do a little setup in the booth, so you can come by and we'll
have a big check presentation at SHOT Show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Maybe. Yeah. That sounds like a cool idea. Then we'll know who the president is too. We can discuss that further of where things are. So, but anyways, thank you again so much, and thank you all for checking us out. So until next time, gang, aim higher.